Welcome to this special edition of Clot Chat, where we discuss the challenges and issues faced by female researchers as part of our Women in STEM initiative.
It's something we've really struggled talking about this in Reading over the years. And it's the sort of fall off as you go through the career structure, because I think some of the reasons why, for example, there are fewer women who are heads of schools, for example, is that because there's a fall off as you climb the ranks, as it were, within academia, to the point where there are fewer women to choose from. And so it sort of follows that one follows the other. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to think about why is there this sort of fall off as you go through the academic career. And it's really interesting in the life sciences that certainly at the undergraduate level, we have slightly weighted higher in women than men. And then postgraduate, it's sort of 50-50-ish, but the balance is sort of pushing slightly the other way. And then by the time you get to lectureship, it's that you can notice a substantial difference, and then it just gets worse and worse. And the problem is that when you advertise for a position, the candidates who come forward are the candidates who come forward. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about why is it that we don't get so many women applying for these particular types of roles. And so I think that there are sort of some underlying issues that are not easy issues, but somehow they're influencing this sort of trajectory. Of course, there's a lot we can do with in terms of considering how we support and encourage and ensure people maximize their potential in their careers when they're there. But it's trying to understand that pathway. It's a bit frustrating, actually, trying to sort of think about how to address this.
It's a huge struggle, I think, by the time you've got children and you're dealing with that in an academic life. And I'm hearing all the time at the moment, do what you can from our school, do what you can, but yet that's not actually reflected in workload whatsoever. And academia is such an unusual position in that we don't just have workload coming via the route of our employee, if you like. We have workload coming from all sorts of different angles that's hitting us from different directions, and that's to allow us to be recognized internationally in terms of what we're doing with our research. It's to review, which includes paper reviews, grant reviews, giving talks at various institutions, generally virtually now, unfortunately, but all of these things all contribute to our workload, and that's something that I think other people find outside of academia find it quite difficult to actually understand. I know, just explaining it to my parents or something, they've now got a good grasp of it, but nevertheless, it's like, well, you have to just say to them that you're overworked and you've got it doesn't work in terms of timing. I was wondering whether, looking forward, whether there are, over the last 12 months, we have had to look at the way we work. We are now, all businesses for years have been saying we can't possibly have people working from home, and now we have to, and we do, and businesses are succeeding. So I wonder whether there are ways that we can change how we work and how we do science and do research, obviously not the lab-based stuff, to make it easier for people to work from home, to make it easier to take advantage of the technology, but doing it in a proper way where the workload is managed. And I think Nikki's point is really important there, that this workload is it's like a tidal wave, isn't it? It just keeps coming and keeps coming. And if we were able to manage that workload and work smarter by using working from home more effectively, does that open up more opportunities for the future for people to try and be more flexible, to maybe work at institutions but live with their families and things like that. So it's more of a sort of a general looking forward, and it's the things that we can take from the last 12 months that we can try and, it needs policy change, doesn't it? It needs large scale change, but actually there are some probably really good examples that we've all seen of where some things have got a little bit easier because of the way we've been able to do them, and how do we carry that forward to benefit people? I liked what Steve said in terms of looking forward, and it's been one of the big take homes from me from the whole COVID situation, is that there's no way my work can criticize me that I'm not producing from home and not managing to accomplish the tasks that I should be doing. So whether I want to be in the office or whether I want to work from my home, and whether I want to attend maybe that meeting virtually rather than in person, then that should be an option that we all are allowed to consider and allowed to move forward with in the future.
I think as sort of like a PhD student and a sort of early postdoc, you always get this guilt that you should be working all the time. So I think then that stems going on forward when you talk about, oh, you know, if you ever have a family, spending time that way rather than on work, because it's like, oh, if you're not working on a Saturday, you know, you're not getting papers done. It's sort of like that pressure that you get from your seniors, but your PIs and stuff, you just think that's how it is. So, and you know, they're relying on the papers to get the grants to fund you, so you sort of like kind of get that. But to have some discussion to be like, oh yeah, it's okay if you only work one weekend in a month or something. So I think COVID might help with that, to realize from the PIs above that actually, you know, you don't need to give a person a deadline of 2 weeks. You know, they'll do it and do it well, just with a little bit of extra time. You know, they don't need that extra pressure on top. And then that may help as you go further on to be like, oh, actually, no, I'm doing fine. You know, I'm still getting my work done and having this family life balance.
I think want to comment on what Sam said. I do hope, in fact, if there's one thing we're gonna benefit from this COVID situation, is that PIs and senior PIs will understand that being in the lab 7-on-7 isn't all the time the most efficient way, and then we can still be efficient by maybe being less in the lab, but we organize differently. I think this is the only thing that I hope with the COVID situation, we're gonna break this mentality in academia that you have to be in the lab all the time and working all the time to get things done. So I think this is what I think hopefully will change.
Kind of touch on what Julie said about less time in the lab. I know our university kind of released a statement for all like PhD students, and they said like, you will get your PhD, but you must remember that a PhD is about thinking and not just the practical aspect. And I think that is something that we can take away from that, and like it's quality over quantity. And I think that really should be the message, like in terms of academia as a whole. I mean, it's very simplified and like obviously much easier said than done, but it does require like support and like showing that you don't need to be working 24/7 and that you can have a family and you don't need to move like miles across the country to progress your career. Like obviously there's a lot to be done with that. But yeah.
I've got a kind of weird working model at the moment since I moved to Reading, and you know, it's something that I spoke to John about, and it was this idea that, you know, there are the kind of very practical lab aspects of the job, but also there's the writing and the reading and everything else. So I actually do 3 days on site, 2 days at home, and so far that's working, and it kind of allows us to move the project along, but the other bits also get done, and I don't feel like I'm under pressure to kind of be in the lab 7 days a week, or you know, guilt for that. But I think one of the best bits of advice I got was during my PhD, and I think it was from Sarah, when she was saying actually it's about working smart rather than working hard. And you know, during my PhD I was quite happy to go in and work weekends, and you know, I had a really supportive mentor, but I also saw that he was working really hard, and I thought, oh, you know, I need to emulate that in some ways. And then kind of moving into postdocs, I was like, actually, I guess I am allowed to have a weekend, and you know, and the world doesn't stop turning, you know, and you can still produce stuff. And I think it's really important that, you know, we kind of let, you know, kind of earlier career researchers know that it is okay to switch off every now and then. You know, in fact, it's probably better that you do, because academic burnout is real.
Just add on to that. So I think that's something we've definitely seen in PhD students. You know, not saying they weren't working hard before, but because they now have limited time in the lab, they have to be more prepared. Where before you could come in and you could sort of decide on the day and be a bit more, but now if you've only got 4 hours in the lab because that's your shift, you have to be more focused, more organized. And I think those sorts of things are the types of practice I think would be really beneficial to try and capture the essence of that, because as Kirk said, if you work smarter and you use that time more effectively, it means you're not feeling guilty about taking time off then, because you are managing, you know, keeping, you know, whatever targets you set yourself, whatever sort of, you know, So I think those are the sorts of things I think we've got to be really careful not to forget, because we will forget, these things, in 12 months time when we start moves back to normal, we'll sort of drift back into that. And it's about how do we capture those good practices and make sure that they live on, because they're what's going to make differences to people's lives. If we can give people extra hours in a day, because they're being the way they're working, then that's going to give you time for your family, or give you time for your hobby, or just for yourself, whatever that might be. So
again, something came to mind after Sam was talking about like pressures and everything, and I think a lot of people are guilty of this, not just like women in science, but like we can really easily compare ourselves to other people, and I think that's to our own like detriment as well, like putting that added pressure on ourselves. But yeah, that was just before I forgot.
That's exactly what I was going to say as well. And it's not only the pressure from your institution and how much work you should be doing, it's actually the pressure within ourselves that we put on ourselves. And whether it's PhD students putting a huge amount of pressure on themselves, feeling like they should be in the lab all the time, or I really felt it from my first child going back to work. I was suddenly getting a train home 2 hours earlier than what I used to. It was still kind of 5 o'clock, but I was getting the train home 2 hours earlier every day. And then I started panicking, going, oh God, I'm doing 2 hours less a day. That's 10 hours less a week. And started really putting the pressure. And then I felt like I was doing a rubbish job at both. And it took about a year for me just to mentally think, give myself a break, no, I'm doing all right. I've got a happy child. I'm doing okay at work. And I think that's something that needs to be built into mentorship as well. It's just, it's not all about the time that you spend doing it. And as I said to Kirk, work smarter, not harder, and just give yourself a break. Because at the end of the day, I think you need to step back from work anyway to then look at things with fresh eyes and look at things objectively. And if you're constantly doing, you don't have time to step back and think. So yeah, I think we need to give ourselves a break.